The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alldus podcast. I'm your host, Ben Sparks, and today we are continuing with our Digital Transformation series with a focus on ServiceNow. Today we are very proud to be joined by Phil Holmer, who is Assistant Vice President and ServiceNow Product Owner at US. Phil's held a number of technical and leadership roles with a focus on security, navigating the consultancy and now internal consultancy world and now internal at US Bank. Phil's passions are leadership, strategy and technology. He is passionate about helping organizations meet their IT and business objectives through utilizing his in-depth knowledge of ITSM, IT ops and security. He's currently working with US Bank, ensuring that ServiceNow is being utilized to its full potential, bringing the best value it can to its business stakeholders. In this conversation, we're going to focus on mentorship and how important and pivotal that's been through Phil's career. He's going to give us a rare glimpse into both digital transformation trends across ServiceNow in the financial services industry and also the security space. And he's also going to be looking at ServiceNow and why that is the platform of choice across organizations. So Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No worries. So look, as I mentioned before, security background, you're now internal in the financial services industry, but you've obviously navigated a number of different roles, be that as a consultant in a consultancy or as an end customer. We're seeing a lot of people make those similar moves and have a lot of interest in probably your career. Do you mind giving us an overview of where it all started and some of the milestones?
I very much got into IT at a young age. When I went to college, it was not for IT, which gave me a really unique perspective into my career and definitely helped through consulting. My dad worked at the university I went to and they didn't offer an IT program. So it was go pay or go get it for free. So I went for the free option. I ended up getting 2 degrees, one in business administration, which that would make sense, and one in urban development, which goes back to those community building. That urban development degree helped a tremendous amount and still something that I lean on. The big reason for that is in business generally, so much of your role is based upon motivation, leadership, and bringing people together, showing them a better option. The challenge with IT and IT training is you have this inherent sense of you're the hammer and everything's a nail and you're just going to get it done and this is the right way to do it. Or at least that's the case for me. That's definitely my natural disposition. Through urban development, a lot of what I learned was to lead people and let them come to the conclusion on their own, which is very difficult. But if you can master that, if you can master having someone arrive at a conclusion that is the right conclusion, but it's their idea, whether you're managing up, whether you're managing down, whether you're managing sideways or laterally, that will change your ability to influence people, make friends, right? To quote an old book. So for me, through that process, I got into infrastructure. My first job was picking up the phone and answering end user support for residential customers about how to fix their Gmail account and how to reset their passwords.
Wow.
I went on that road for quite a while until I got I think fabled at this point. I feel like this is a lot of people's story in infrastructure, or at least in managed services. Got a call at 1 a.m. I live in Minnesota. And it was below zero, probably close to 10 below, very cold, very not fun weather outside. And somebody's firewall had gone down and there was no way to remotely fix it. And at that moment, I went, this is my last day doing managed services and infrastructure support. So I get in my car, drive across town. That was the breaking moment. And in that moment, I went, I need to reach out. I need to reach out to the people. I'm going to be talking about one specifically very soon here and get into something different, get into something that's not managed services. This is how I transferred into consulting. Through that whole process and then really resetting my whole career because I got out of infrastructure and went into consulting and then software development, software support, and ultimately project management, did a number of different things. I had to learn a lot over and over again to cut my teeth. And what we had termed this in the consulting world is the gray hair syndrome. So I'm still in my 30s. And as a consultant in my 20s, it was very difficult leading people who had been doing this for longer than I had been alive. And so in that time, I had to really get to a point where I wasn't afraid to put in the work. I wasn't afraid to work the long hours, even though I was getting compensated for it. I had to put in the time to learn, put in the humility to be wrong, to say the wrong thing in front of a group of people, a large group of people at some points in time, leading workshops where they're all sometimes the expert and I'm not, and go through that process. There's a saying, you have to choose to either be humbled or be humiliated. And I gotta tell you, I had that humiliation point several times in my career. And to be honest, I still do. The last kind of big piece is once I made all those transitions and really started pushing into consulting, I had the consulting growth time because I had that mentality of my work hard, work long, and put in the time. Over 7 years, and really in the software development spaces, closer to 5.5 years, I worked for 24 clients and did over 76 module implementations in one way or another. For the most of those implementations, I was either functioning as a project lead or an architect. And that's what got me here today, moving from consulting. I had a mentor who we'll talk about in a second that always told me I needed to get out of that managed and small business vibe and get into an enterprise. And that's what led me to US Bank ultimately.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned it there, mentorship. And I know when we first spoke a few weeks ago, one of the things I was most excited about is you seem very much aligned with mentorship and it added true value through your career, which is, we'll come on to the digital transformation bit in a minute, but mentorship's a key part of the podcast. You mentioned a couple of them or you nodded towards a few of them there. Who have been the key people and how important has mentors been throughout your career to date?
Absolutely. The first and the biggest, and the one I will encourage all parents out there to never underestimate your impact, was my own dad, who encouraged me from a very young age to pursue IT, pursue computers, and more than that, showed me, he never taught me, but he showed me how to work hard, how to not give up, how to do hard things. To this day, I could go tell you story after story of him bringing me to some work thing. He owned a couple rental properties and would drop me off when he went to work at 3 a.m. as a young teenager, and I would get picked up at 2 p.m. to go home after he was done working, and learned a ton. And so I try and bring that into my own parenting as well. Recently, bringing my son to a handful of work, like hard labor type stuff. He's 6, and to see him grow in that same way has been incredible. So my dad first. If I go just chronologically, that's probably the easiest way for me to separate them so that way no one sees I'm singling someone else out. My first boss, Tyler Olson. In those moments of looking back to how Tyler, and to this day, how he has and continues to mentor me and encourage me, he has been somebody that set a precedent as a first boss. And once again, if you have the opportunity to be a first boss, I would encourage you in this way. You are setting a precedent for that person. In this case, Tyler encouraged me. He gave me a lot of opportunities. He is still very much pro failure first, meaning let's give people opportunities to do great and difficult things. I ended up running that company with Tyler, doing everything but the finances, and eventually worked with Tyler to do a merger acquisition, which is really incredible. We don't have enough time today to go through all the things I learned there, but Tyler is just great, gave me some really great opportunities. Now, the person that I referred to in the previous moments is a gentleman by the name of Chuck Bees. Chuck is somebody that's very near and dear to my heart. It's hard to go through all the things that he taught me. I think the highlights, if I were to try and narrow them down, he is the one that actually got me the job in the consulting role. That was life-changing, pivotal. The next would be his challenge for me to not go back to school. I do really like education. I like learning. And his coaching, his mentoring to me, were the time that you'll lose with your kids isn't worth the money you'll make. You'll never get that time back. You can always go back to school. And he was the one that made that mistake. He, in his words, went and got his master's. And when his kids were young, and he said he wished he had the time back to spend more time with his kids at the end of his career. And that was pivotal. He is the one that also always challenged me to get into a enterprise role so that way I could round out my career aspirations and open the doors up for wherever else I go. And Chuck is a good example of somebody that moved me along my career having no inherent value. He did not make anything from that. Although I did come to work with him for a time, he was the one that also encouraged me to leave that company, go somewhere else. And that's really incredible. The last, certainly not the least, and there's a lot of others, but I'll have to narrow it down here just to a couple. A gentleman by the name of Rob Hayes. He gave me 3 rules that I still use in my leadership role today. And those 3 rules are: when you work hard. The premise here is that you don't have to work 90 hours a week. If you work 40, you work 30, you work 20, whatever you're working, when you're at work, when you're putting in that time, work. So that's the first. The second, integrity. So do what you say you're going to do. When you say you're going to finish something, finish it. When you say you're going to do it well. And the last is the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that he got this from a football coach, from a college football coach, and I have asked him several times, and he's answered me several times about who that is. I don't remember. So not his idea, but still really great. And probably the last piece that he showed me was how to, in a very hands-on approach, do software development and leadership. There's a moment where we were in the middle of a project and we weren't making the progress that we were wanting to. And instead of just doing like the Scrum Master approach, where you're sitting there and harping on us and saying, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you need to be faster, you need to increase your velocity. He had myself and 2 other people come into a room for 6 or 8 hours a day for several weeks until we finished this. And this was something that he had done on top of his other projects. It was a really selfless, but also a motivating time, something that I will always remember as a manager and a leader, that it can help morale and it can help project timelines. And more than anything else, I think it helps train people for the better when you're willing to get your hands dirty and put in the work. And so I've taken that and I've done that several times.
Wow, you're very fortunate to have a good number of key mentors there, and it seems like that hard work but also family theme has gone through all of them. We mentioned before that you've navigated the consulting to the end customer world. In the marketplace, when we look at the amount of talent that's moving around, we're seeing people either making those moves or interested in making those moves, and consulting to end customer and vice versa. What are some of the key learns you've had navigating that?
Absolutely. There was a moment early on in my career where I was asked to present to the C-level staff at an organization. Doing that had changed that project pretty dramatically, and it taught me, first of all, how to present to that level, but also to ask that question: who is your champion? The C-level wasn't the champion. The champion was somebody who advocated for us as the consultancy to come in and to win by encouraging OCM, organizational change management, which I'll talk about a little bit more later as well. But that really helped. And it helped us also very clearly communicate what's your objectives, document them, communicate them, post them. Now, I will say, with agile and consulting and waterfall approaches to project management, those objectives can be very difficult and can be detrimental to the customer and detrimental to you as a consultancy, or if you're independent. I've had it multiple times where we started with an objective that was our goal, and it ended up not being what we needed. It ended up being something that was completely different, that they actually needed to be successful. And so if and when objectives change, it's just communicating those. It's being very transparent that this can change, and being ready to put business value statements together for those. I think when you get into especially large critical programs, having financial statements, but having different venues of benefit statements. One thing I didn't actually write down, but I think it's been very helpful for me, is a 5-fold approach for software development. So whenever somebody is saying, I want to do something, especially something that's custom, something that's costly, something that may end up backfiring, I measure it against 5 principles. I think I've collected these. I don't know if this is mine or not. I've just been using it for so long. And that is, The security, is there a security impact to whatever we're going to do? Is there a performance impact to whatever we're going to do? Is there a manageability impact, meaning upgrades, so on and so forth? And different, is it going to take us a long time to manage this moving forward? Is there a security, upgradability, performance? Upgradability. And the last one is business value. So is there an impact to the business based on this? And if we can't articulate all fivefold that it's worth the costs there, then we really shouldn't move forward. And so having those objectives, having those champions to help carry the torch and help communicate that when they don't want to listen to the consultant, or sometimes it's inverse. You're on the inside and they will only listen to the consultant. So figuring out who your champions are and ensuring that you're leveraging them well.
And if you're going to mentor our audience now, looking back over your career, what would be some of the key advice you would want to share with them that you'd maybe give to yourself if you were to go back and do it all again?
Yeah, certainly the cutting my teeth. I spent far too long frustrated by being underpaid and overworked. If you're starting a new career, transitioning careers, or just at a point in your life where you're going, I need something different, being ready to work hard for a time and know that when you sow a seed, it takes time for it to grow at times. So that would be one that has been huge. I've told many young teenagers that when it comes to career development, do something for 10 years. If you really want to just make a living, they're sometimes really scared to go out and be something in the world, try it for 10 years and you're almost certainly, if you work hard, will make enough to make a living, minimally. Doesn't mean you'll love your job, but you'll be able to feed your family. And then if you can do that and love your job, all the better. Then your family's fed and you enjoy what you're doing. So that's been a big one for me, that grit, which of course probably feeds into the whole endurance athletics thing. Even if you're not the gray hair, be okay with being wrong. I think I've seen a lot of, in my own life, being really afraid to speak out, to give my ideas, to speak when maybe it's going to backfire because I'm not the most, quote unquote, the smartest or most experienced person in the room. But I found that through those times where I was ready to speak out, I was willing to be wrong and lead with humility. Those times that I'm wrong, I've learned so much. And then the one time that I'm right, it helps me go, this is where I want to go, and figure out what is going to be my platform. What is it that I want to do with my life? Much more than just a career, but as a person. And finally, for me, I think it's a little different for everyone, but for me personally, I wish I would have leveraged StrengthsFinders sooner. I've really enjoyed doing StrengthsFinders and using them with my team. Previous consultancy used it quite a bit, and using it for mentorship as well, having somebody take the StrengthsFinder, explain to them what those look, knowing that although it's not supposed to be able to change, we change as people, and it can happen with situations. They can shift up and down. And so those are things that I wish I would have used earlier in my career.
So I'd love to zoom out a bit and talk about some of the digital transformational trends and as we mentioned earlier, ServiceNow. And I'm cautious, probably each of these questions I'm going to ask you are probably a podcast on their own. I'd love to know your viewpoints on some of the wider digital transformation trends that you're seeing and have seen as it relates more generally to security. We're seeing a lot of that at the moment, and I'd love your viewpoint on it.
Apart from the normal buzzwords of orchestration, automation, machine learning, AI, something that I've seen personally that I think it's something that organizations and tools are coming together and doing better is the unification of data. So I don't mean just our old enterprise service bus. Maybe it's not old for some people, but certainly in my career, it's something that I saw early on and then went away. It's not just putting all the data into one place, but it's that, if you're familiar with ITIL, it's DIKW process. It's moving data to information, to knowledge, and then wisdom, but at mass. So you're taking all of the possible data elements, especially when it comes to security, right? All of your attack vectors, all the different organizations that are coming up with individual perspectives on how to do things. I think NIST and CSF have, or NIST and CIS have made a lot of really good headway here. And so as we see those things become normalized, it's very similar to ITIL. We will see the tool sets also start to normalize the data models. We'll start to see more and more of an ability to take this mass amount of data, terabytes, petabytes, zettabytes of data, and do something with them. That's super exciting for me.
And what about in the sort of financial services and banking industry? What are we seeing there?
Obviously, everything's going digital. We're seeing a lot of people, a lot of mergers and acquisitions. We're seeing a lot of different organizations coming together. And so I think beyond that, if I were to try and reach my hand out a little further and say, where are we going a little longer term? It's that same data principle that IT is leading with, but on the finance side. So I started to see this already a little bit with a number of what I would say is disparate or different verticals in finance, whether it's investments, whether it's personal finance, but it's taking all of these pieces of information and creating wisdom, creating decisions that we can start to do good automation, good machine learning, securely, obviously, but for the end user. So I foresee a day where when you take all of your tax information, your accounting information, your debt, your investments, you take all those things and you look at what's happening globally and what's happening nationally and what's happening locally, you can start to see some automated trending and automated suggestions that you'll no longer need an investment professional, a tax professional, accounting professional, and a debt consolidation agent all in the same room, a mortgage agent all in the same room to go, here's what I think you should do. We'll start to see that all together. I think QuickBooks started this, and now we're seeing it at a large enterprise scale.
You are listening to the Alldus Podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
And I think obviously when we look at ServiceNow, we're starting to see that being positioned as the platform of choice for enterprise at the moment. And I think we're very cognizant of technology is just one part of it, right? You've got people, processes, and then technology. In your view, why is ServiceNow at the moment the platform of choice? And I'm interested in that from a general security and also a banking financial services sort of point of view.
That's an interesting conversation for sure. This could take several hours. I've had the unique opportunity to go to participate in the last several knowledge conferences and present at them. And I'm also in the Product Advisory Council for ServiceNow for security specifically. What I've seen is they have really doubled down on their development. So I wouldn't say insider trading because it's not necessarily a secret, but ServiceNow has taken and multiplied several fold the amount of developers and the velocity of enhancements to specifically their security platform. I think it may be one of the greatest maturity growths of all the modules inside ServiceNow over the last 4 to 5 years. So that's one big reason why I've seen that huge. When I started, there was no security, and it was virtually zero 7, 8, 9 years ago. And so to now, we're seeing them excel at taking these different pieces of data that I've been alluding to and creating some wisdom and some knowledge about all that data. This is where now we're getting machine and AI coming from. So machine learning and AI is now able to inspect all this data. When you're talking about hundreds of millions of rows over the course of, and sometimes we're getting billions of rows over the course of dozens of different modules and different processes. If you want to take one particular thing and understand what all is happening with that thing, a device, an application, cloud infrastructure, whatever it is, and understand all the policies, controls, all the security logs, the alerts, the vulnerabilities, the compliance deviations, and you want to understand what's the risk associated with that and then get into cost management, that's why ServiceNow is the platform of choice. Trying to do that in separate platforms is very difficult, and ServiceNow is doing a very good job on communicating that and delivering it, not just selling it, but delivering it. And then last, I've seen them do a good transformation on bringing together verticals and peer groups. For a long time, software development companies are good at having local user groups. They're really good at saying, hey, let's get together and bring our developers together and learn from each other what something cool you did. But now we're seeing that at the management and the executive level more and more, dedicated to those different verticals. And so I think that's a big one. And another big one why ServiceNow, I think, is really excelling, or they will continue to excel with the future of that platform, is around their ability to deliver government contracts, very highly secured information. They're pushing that very much faster, much further than I'm seeing a lot of the competition. FedRAMP, for instance, is a huge one that they're continuing to increase. And we're just seeing a lot in the way of what you can do with the platform.
And what have been some of the noteworthy implementations or projects that you've been part of within ServiceNow?
Yeah, that's a podcast as well.
I told you.
Yeah. So I'll keep it brief. 75 implementations, and then 4 years at the bank. We've done quite a bit in no specific order, no specific companies, but we were able to implement, myself and a team, the first Rapid7 go live. So that integration between Rapid7 and ServiceNow vulnerability, that was noteworthy for me, because being the first out there, it gave me an introspective view, or not just introspective, but a perspective about how ServiceNow does certifications of integrations, about how their internal operations work, and then how these partners are working. And if you're going to get into owning the product, understanding the stack of support is critical. That will give you a totally different set of tools to go get things changed, get things fixed, tune things. And for myself and in my career, we really do push the boundary of what the platform can do. This doesn't mean customization. It means taking what's base system and then just going as far as you can with it, whether it's volume data, speed of remediation, so on and so forth. So that Rapid7 Go Live was pivotal for me. The previous company, we were the first globally approved SecOps partner. Going through that process and seeing how ServiceNow was going to do that, how they were going to vet their partnerships, that was really impressive. It was a big moment for us. And also, probably more important, was having the team, training the team, leveraging the team to have that SecOps, the security ops module expertise when it's brand new. That's really tough. There isn't a whole lot, if any, expertise to go back on because no one's done this before. And so having that moment of being an expert when there is no expertise to lean on, pretty great. I think pushing the art of possible we've talked about, and just the number of things that we've been able to develop and seeing what you can do with the platform between custom apps, integrations. We've had a couple of really cool software asset management integrations that would onboard or would automate the entire provisioning process. Some customers that saved billions of dollars in onboarding fees because every single piece of the procurement was automated, from the contract management to maintenance to lifecycle management. It was really great.
Some amazing ones there. And again, if you had to summarize, because I'm sure there was an immense value seen from each of these projects, but if you had to summarize some of the key values that the businesses saw from pushing forward with these initiatives, what would some of those value adding summaries be?
So the first one is pretty easy to express, and that is moving SLAs, cutting them by 50%, 90%, going from a 60-day or 90-day SLA to a week. That's insane. That is something that is really hard to quantify and qualify exactly how much impact it has. At some point, you can say, hey, this was a benefit and this is a value that we got from it. But at another point, you just can't, because taking that amount of time and crunching the amount of work down that you can deliver and going from 2 months to 1 week is a large amount of value. The next, I'm just condensing into one statement, and that is having the business make changes from the way they've always done it. This is very difficult. This is by far the most difficult. I tell my bosses and even peers and sometimes the customer themselves, the tool is easy. People are hard. And usually that makes especially developers chuckle. Like, yeah, I understand that. So when you're taking somebody who's used Tableau, when they've used Excel, when they're used to just being able to write a script directly in SQL and have their own query and create their own front end and saying, nope, it's going to happen this way now, that progress on having people change is value. When you can start to take every person who has different processes, they have different tool sets, they have different ways of managing value, and unify it to a single process, a single tool set, and a single set of data. Now you can look at trends in a whole new way. As long as everyone's working differently, it's nearly impossible to say, what is our machine learning and AI going to say about our organization as a whole? So that's, in a nutshell, probably some of the biggest values I've seen in different organizations.
And obviously, every project runs completely perfectly without any bumps in the road. Looking back, what would you say have been some of the biggest learns, or maybe if you had to summarize one key learn that you've had across all of these projects?
Yeah, and these aren't really for me because mine always go perfect. Certainly the biggest failures come down to communication. They come down to not having good leadership support. They come down to a contract that is being forced to deliver in the exact way that it was written, and then not communicating changes to that, and not having good organizational change management. So I never underestimate the work involved with change and organizational change management. Even when it's not my responsibility, I will be the one to bring it up over and over and over and over.
Probably the last few questions, if I had to put you on the spot, and you have to give me your kind of quick fire answers. Some of the people that we speak to, technology is one thing. When we're looking at executive stakeholder management, is something people are really trying to navigate at the moment. What would be some of your key advice to someone who's struggling with key stakeholder management at the moment?
A good kickoff, regular communication. Be okay with asking them, why do you need to be this way? That can be really daunting, especially if you have an executive stakeholder who is, we'll just say, tough. Somebody who's just
tough.
Really tough. So when you have somebody that really wants it done their way and they don't want you to influence that, be okay with frustration. I think be okay with gently but firmly calling people out for doing a certain way because it's always been done that way, and asking why.
And when it comes to, again, another theme we're seeing is that people are scaling ServiceNow teams swiftly, and that is due to project demands. What would be your key piece of advice for building but also sustaining a winning ServiceNow team?
This is an interesting question in that I think in the security ops space, it's not given nearly enough time. What I found is my team is one of the larger teams in the world that supports just 2 modules primarily right now. These 2 modules in the security ops space, when I tell people, yeah, we've got 7 people on the team and a host of people that support us, I go, wow, that's way more than everyone else. I go, yep. And that's one of the reasons that we have such a successful implementation. It's hard because so many of the people that I work with directly haven't necessarily seen bad implementations, and certainly ours is not one of them, but with my team members, they have, and they know how good we have it. So dedicated people, if you want a good implementation of ServiceNow, hiring expertise and training expertise and being okay with the cost associated with that, and you get out what you put in. Beyond that, just general team management, general things that I've been transformed by. Patrick Lencioni, ideal team player. Get people, train people, tell people, are you hungry? Are you humble? Are you smart? So I'll just tell you, go read the book. I won't go through the whole premise. The smart piece means smart with people. So soft skills are not to be underestimated. Do they have a passion for the platform? Do they have the patience with users, those soft skills? And do they have the patience with each other? Do they play well together? Does your team jive? In Agile, you have that storming, norming, forming, performing. Storming, norming, forming, performing. Yeah, there we go. So
it doesn't roll off the tongue that easy, does it?
Yeah. Looking at those models and leveraging them and then communicating them, having that normal retrospective to ask, how are we doing in this? And as I do my one-on-ones, I ask these questions week in, week out. And in that time where I do get some feedback, those are the moments that it's great to be able to press in and say, this is what we should be changing.
And look, you've given us so much here, your career background, themes. What's next? Just in your humble opinion, if we were to look into a crystal ball, and what's next for ServiceNow in the banking industry, and probably more generally in security, if we'd just like to close there.
Absolutely. I think I let this out of the bag a little bit sooner because I was so excited about it. There are already some really cool companies, some vendors out there that are taking different companies, organizations, and taking high-level scan data, whether it's security incident or vulnerability response, or anything across that NIST or CIS benchmark, and comparing them to each other. I think we're going to see that at a whole nother level in the next generation of the next season of security in banking. So whether it's looking at how you compare to others personally, or your organization, your team compares to other teams, those are things that we'll be able to start to leverage data sets to make decisions on and start to automate suggestions. Here's how you can be a better team. Here's how you can have better personal finance. Here's how you can make changes, especially as we can start to see that data securely inspected, interrogated, and making some smart suggestions to end users, teams, and companies. So I think on one side, on the other side, it's just scalability, it's volume, it's performance. These things go hand in hand, right? The first and second point. But as we see more and more data able to be ingested, able to be learned from, able to be secured through these processes, it's going to lend itself to the AI and the machine learning. But these things will have to go hand in hand. It's the old software versus hardware conundrum. Which one goes first? And they have to go at the same time.
Phil, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you'd love to add before we call it a day?
Other than to say thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and I hope that it helps those who are listening.
It will do. No doubt in that at all. And I'm sure you'll probably even get a few messages off the back of this as well. So really appreciate your time, Phil. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.